If you want to lose weight, exercise doesn't really matter. The new global study found that hunter gatherers who walk miles and miles and miles every single day end up burning about the same number of calories as the guy sitting at his desk all week long. Exercise isn't the driver of fat loss that we once thought it was. American diet is made up of more than 60% ultra processed foods. So when we see obesity rates climbing here, it's not because we suddenly stopped moving. It's because the food environment has changed so drastically and so much faster than our biology has been able to adapt. Across 25 populations, the percentage of ultra processed food ends up being the strongest predictor of body fat percentage. So let's talk about what this actually means for you, because if it's not about willpower, if it's not about discipline, if it's not about white knuckling our way through our food choices, it's about understanding that ultra processed foods in and of themselves are engineered to make us overeat. It all comes down and titrates right back down to the quality and the quantity of the food that we are consuming. So what you can actually do to build a lean, healthy, high-performing body over 40. If you want to lose weight, exercise doesn't really matter. There you go, I said it. Because a new global study found that hunter-gatherers who walk miles and miles and miles every single day end up burning about the same number of calories as your Homer Simpson who sits on the couch all day long. So it begs the question, if activity isn't the answer, then what is? That's what we're breaking down today, and why your metabolism adapts, how modern food is hijacking your fat loss efforts, and what you can actually do to build a lean, healthy, high-performing body over 40. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show. I'm your host, as always, Ben Brown, owner, father of 3, husband, and head coach here at Body Systems. And today we're talking about weight loss, metabolism, and exercise, and how they all go together. Now, if you want to lose weight, like I said, apparently exercise doesn't really matter. And I know that sounds completely wrong, because for decades we've been told to move more and to eat less. That if we just burned more calories in the gym, we'd finally get lean. But a new major study says otherwise. You see, researchers analyzed data from over 4,200 people across 34 different countries. This is from Tanzanian hunter-gatherers, the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, to American office workers, like I said, the proverbial Homer Simpson, and found something that completely flips conventional wisdom on its head. Even though the hunter-gatherers are 10 times more active, they burn about the same number of calories per day as the guy sitting at his desk all week long. Let that sink in for a moment. So if it's not how much we move, what is really driving this weight gain that we're experiencing? I'm going to back up for a second here and share kind of my perspective, because when I first got into fitness and nutrition, I believed what most of us do, right? We just need to move more. We need to be more physically active. We need to do more cardio, because I was tracking my workouts. I was counting my calories. I was trying to out-train my awful eating and drinking behaviors on the weekends. And for a while it worked until it didn't work. And the same thing happens in my coaching program, especially when I first start working with men and women, is, we start hitting the gym 5 or 6 days a week, or they come in and they're training hard already and they don't know what the missing piece is. They come in, they're training hard in the gym, like I said, 4, 5, 6 days a week. Maybe they're runners, or they're doing cardio or conditioning or hiking on the weekends, but their body composition never really changes. And like I said, the conventional wisdom seems to be, well, I just need to find ways to move hard, to move more, to train harder, to eat less. And there might be some truth in those statements, but let me break it down here because at the end of the day, those aren't the right questions to be asking, and it's not the right way to be thinking about how the metabolism actually functions. The truth is that the human body doesn't really play by these types of calorie in, calorie out rules at all. And so the study that I mentioned, this 2025 brand new study that was published in the journal PNAS by evolutionary anthropologist Herman Pontzer, and I've talked about this before on the show of why exercise is not a good fat loss tool. I'm going to post a link to that episode down below in the show notes. But I thought it's a really important concept to revisit here. So what they did in this study is they used the gold standard method for measuring calorie expenditure. And that's what's called the doubly labeled water technique, which is ultimately the most accurate way of tracking total energy expenditure in real life. And what they found, and for clarity, like they didn't measure calorie intake or anything like that, but they used the doubly labeled water to measure caloric expenditure. What they found is that when you account for body size, that essentially everyone burns roughly the same number of calories each day. So whether you are a hunter-gatherer walking 10 miles a day, foraging for food, carrying water, doing those activities of daily living, or you're a relatively sedentary office worker tapping away on your laptop, or maybe even you're somewhere in between of someone who hits the gym 3 or 4 days a week for 45 to 60 minutes. Maybe you're getting, a few miles of steps in each day. Nonetheless, what happens is your body just recalibrates. What happens is your body just reallocates energy. So if you end up moving more, your body's going to naturally cut back on other processes. It's going to cut back on fighting inflammation. It's going to cut back on maybe immune system activity. It could potentially cut back on reproductive function. We see this absolutely at lower levels of leanness when we see fitness competitors and they're in the end stages of, prepping for competition. When they lose hormonal function, women experience amenorrhea or loss of their menstrual cycle. And this is exactly what your metabolism is meant to do, to basically maintain homeostasis and balance things out so that you survive. Like I said, this is what's called metabolic homeostasis. So your body wants to keep energy burn within a very tightly regulated range. And so what does all of this mean when it comes to, exercise and weight loss? Because it begs the question of whether exercise even matters at all. And so it's not that exercise doesn't matter. It just means that we are very clear that exercise isn't the driver of fat loss that we once thought it was. The study found that even after adjusting for lean muscle mass, that the total calorie burn barely changed between active and sedentary populations. There was somewhere around a 6 to 11% difference. And that's it. I mean, it really, at the end of the day, is not that big of a deal. So if your total energy burn doesn't increase much with activity, then it begs the question of like, what's really making people heavier? And I think it's pretty obvious, like certainly what I talk about all the time, in that it's food, right? It's specifically ultra processed food intake. It's the fact that we are grossly over consuming calories, whether it's knowingly or most commonly is unknowingly over consuming calories far above and beyond certainly what we expend on a daily basis and certainly beyond what we actually realize that we consume. What is ultra processed food? Chips, protein bars, protein shakes, flavored yogurts, bread, pasta, sauces, cereals, granola, frozen meals, all the stuff that dominates our modern food culture. You see, across 25 populations, the percentage of ultra processed food ends up being the strongest predictor of body fat percentage. And so that right there, my friends, is the smoking gun. So that when we say you can't outtrain a bad diet, this is unequivocally proof that that is a true statement. And at the end of the day, what's happening is, like I said, we are far and away massively over consuming what we are meant to consume from a caloric intake and expenditure standpoint. Now, it doesn't mean that we're not moving enough, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be moving more, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing more exercise. And I'm going to talk about, some of the logistics of that. But at the end of the day, it all comes down and titrates right back down to the quality and the quantity of the food that we are consuming. So let's talk about what this actually means for you, because if it's not about willpower, if it's not about discipline, if it's not about white knuckling our way through, through our food choices, it's about understanding that ultra processed foods in and of themselves are engineered to make us overeat. These are what I call and what we call hyper palatable, calorically dense, nutrient poor foods. And what they do, and mind you, these are chemically formulated in a lab to keep us eating and eating and eating and eating, regardless of how full or satiated or nutrient supported or otherwise we are, because these foods in and of themselves, they light up your brain's reward pathways, and they make it so easy for us to blow past our hunger cues. We've been there before, right? You crush a bag of chips, maybe it's even one of those small bags, maybe it's baked Lay's, for Christ's sakes. And by the way, like, if you just look at the label on these quote unquote healthier for you chips, they're not low in calories. My wife bought a box from Costco the other day as a quote unquote better option for the kids and for some of their school snacks. And when we looked at the labels, it was quite shocking to actually see that they're not that different than a regular bag of chips. In fact, one of the quote unquote healthier chips was 200 calories for the bag, right? Which you can go through. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it's like 12 chips, right? It's like 1 ounce of chips. You can crush that in 30 seconds and not feel a thing and only want more, right? And you think back, you're like, where did that go? Like, that is designed. Those foods are designed to make us do that and make us want to keep eating. And to say nothing of the fact that these foods also mess with your digestion, they mess with your absorption of nutrients. And studies show that the more processed a food is, the more calories your body actually absorbs from it, because there's less work for your gut to do. So you need to dissect this for a second, my friends. The more calories your body actually absorbs from the highly processed foods, because there is inherently a thermic effect of food. When we eat a chicken breast, when we eat broccoli, when we eat oatmeal, when we eat fruit and vegetables, these foods, they come with nutrients, vitamins, and minerals. They come with fiber. They require chewing and breaking down into their individual molecules. And because of that, there is a certain amount of energy that's required to break down and assimilate these nutrients in the gut. The highly processed foods don't require this. And so they're actually much better digested and absorbed, but that's not a good thing, because it means we're actually absorbing more of those calories, as opposed to like the foods with dietary fiber, where there's some insoluble fibers, where some of those foods, it's like we're just not going to have access to all of the calories that come from the food. And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, that's what food is meant to do. So it's not just that we're eating more, it's that the body's extracting more from what we eat. And like I said, not in a good way. So if we contrast that with kind of the Hadza tribes people in Tanzania, which whom are the same people that Herman Ponser's team studied, what do we see? We see that they're lean, they're active, they eat a diet of real unprocessed foods that consists of like roots and fruit and honey and wild game meats. Meanwhile, on the other side of the pond, if you will, right, the average American diet is made up of more than 60% ultra processed foods. So when we see obesity rates climbing here, it's not because we suddenly stopped moving. It's because the food environment has changed so drastically and so much faster than our biology has been able to adapt. So, I mean, that's really the biggest takeaway here, my friends, is just understanding the difference in foods. And I even posted, I posted something on my Instagram yesterday, which, by the way, if you don't follow me on Instagram, that's where I share a lot of pun intended bite-sized pieces of information around nutrition and fitness and lifestyle and mindset, and give you some of the inner workings of my world if you want to know more about that. So follow me at Body Systems Coaching on Instagram. But, that's really the biggest takeaway. But I still want to dissect and root into exercise here because it obviously matters. And so before you throw away your gym shoes, let's consider that exercise in and of itself is not just about burning calories, right? Exercise is about optimizing how your body uses energy. That's what exercise is. And when you strength train and you move regularly, what you're doing is you're improving your body's ability to partition energy. You are teaching your body to send more calories to the areas where it's supposed to go, to the muscles and to the liver and to the brain. And you're sending less calories to areas to store body fat. Strictly from a weight loss, body composition standpoint, that is one of the most important concepts that I need you to understand around the value that comes from exercise, to the degree that, when we move, we literally, depending on the intensity of the movement, we literally open up the cell's receptors in the absence of insulin. And these are called GLUT4 receptors. And not to get too far into the weeds of biochemistry, but I was explaining to this concept to my muscle physiology class, because I teach a couple classes at Arizona State University, in case you weren't aware. And I'm so enamored by the physiology and the biochemistry of these processes because, we require insulin to be able to shuttle sugar from the blood into the cells. However, with respect to the GLUT4 receptors that come to the cell surface and basically open the doors and the windows of the cell and say, come on in, sugar, right? That's what's happening when we exercise. And so the more that we move, the more we can utilize these GLUT4 receptors to naturally start to absorb the sugars in our blood without over relying on insulin. And that is a magical, magical, beautiful process. And so, like I said, when you strength train, when you move regularly, you're improving your energy partitioning, right? You're teaching your body to send more calories to the areas where you can use them, the muscles, the liver, the brain. What you're also doing is you're reducing chronic inflammation. You are improving your body's insulin sensitivity, and you're boosting what's called metabolic flexibility. This is our body's ability to switch between burning carbs and burning fat efficiently. And what we see, and it's the same concept I was explaining to my class, because in the research, we see sort of these very concrete numbers around whereby, and maybe you remember these in the old days on your pieces of cardio equipment. And honestly, they probably still talk about this in terms of like up till about 65% of your VO2 max, or we'll just say your maximal heart rate, you're burning predominantly fatty acids for fuel. Now, as you ramp up intensity beyond that 65%, you start to tap more into carbohydrate for fuel. And it's sort of this concrete graph that they use in every exercise physiology class. However, what we know very clearly is there's a massive subset of people that are much more highly reliant on carbohydrate for fuel, even at lower intensities of output. Said differently, is we have people where at rest, they should be relying on fatty acids for fuel, on stored fat, basically, for energy. They're not, that's not happening. We're relying more and more and more on carbohydrates for fuel. And that doesn't make carbohydrates bad. It just means we are less and less metabolically flexible to be able to switch back and forth between using fats and carbs. We're becoming much more reliant on carbs for an immediate energy source, regardless of the intensity. That's problematic. And so by getting more metabolically flexible, we start to push those margins out, whereby at rest and at lower intensities of exercise, we truly are more reliant on fatty acids. And at higher intensity exercises, we truly are more reliant on carbohydrate, but we're not blurring those lines as much. And sure, like over time, building more muscle is going to slightly raise your daily energy burn, slightly. But the real benefit here isn't just how many more extra calories that muscle mass burns. It's what the muscle's contributing to in terms of how you feel, how you function, the muscle's ability to produce energy from the mitochondria, because the muscle is the largest organ in the body. It's the most metabolically active organ to the degree that it has the most cells. And cells have, if you remember from biology, right, it has mitochondria, and mitochondria are the energy powerhouses of the cell. And so the more muscle we have, the more mitochondria we can produce, the more ATP, the more energy we can produce, the better that we're going to feel, the better that we're going to function. That's the beautiful thing about having muscle mass. And at the end of the day, you become more stress resilient. You become sharper, and proverbially, you become harder to kill. And so, as Ponser said here through his research, he says essentially that exercise helps your body rejuggle where the energy goes. It keeps your metabolism efficient, and it helps keep your inflammation low, right? We are much better off having more lean muscle tissue, because that's a metabolically active tissue, versus having more body fat, which also, by the way, is a metabolically active tissue, but not in a good way. Body fat is very metabolically unhealthy, very inflammatory tissue that innervates through the body, around the organs, in between the muscle fibers and what have you. So the less, obviously, body fat we have within reason, the more muscle mass we have, the better for all of these functions. And that's why in our Prime Fit coaching program, when we work with clients, we don't chase calorie burn. Like, we track it depending on the client. And, depending on how advanced the client is, we might be hooking up their Garmin watch or their Apple Watch to our tracking apps and actually be paying attention to what their active energy expenditure looks like. But for the vast majority of people, we're not concerned with calorie burn. We're concerned with caloric intake. We're concerned with metabolic capacity as an opportunity to help the body run better, run faster, run hotter, not just reducing calories, not just overusing exercise to try and burn more. So what do we do with all of this information, right? Because I just threw a lot at you, and hopefully with some tangible takeaways there. So here's what I'm going to suggest, just based on the context of this conversation. 3 specific things. 1, eat real food. If most of your calories come from real, minimally processed foods, these are what we call single ingredient foods in our community. These are lean proteins, fruits and vegetables and potatoes and rice and oats. Then you'll naturally regulate your appetite and your energy. You don't have to be perfect around these things. It needs a considerable amount of intentionality. Now, I am not saying don't eat any of the foods that you enjoy, but if you are making up at least 80% of your dietary and caloric intake from these single ingredient foods, I promise you, you are going to look and feel and perform very, very different than those who are consuming 60% of their calories from overly processed and hyper palatable foods. And when you're doing that, then you also have the flexibility and the freedom to include more of the tasty treats, if you will, that you want, right? A little ice cream or pizza or French fries or, whatever that looks like. But I also promise, the more you rely on building your foods out with these single ingredient foods, better you're going to feel and the more you're going to want to eat those foods because you know how good they make you feel. Number 2, move your body every single day. We train to build lean muscle tissue. We train to manage stress and regulate our nervous system. We train to improve confidence and our commitments and following through with promises that we make to ourselves and providing evidence that we are someone who does hard things, who exercises in some way, shape, or form daily, who knows what it feels like to push intensely in the gym because it carries over and permeates over to other areas of life. We're not training to earn more calories. We are training for all of these other reasons. And that includes strength training, includes walking, includes being recreationally active, playing sports, running around with the kids, going hiking. All of this stuff counts, but also requires intentionality. And then lastly is truly focusing on recovery. And I think this area, and this is myself included, I think this area really, we just do lip service to the aspect of recovery. And I'm not talking about freaking the biohacking nonsense. I'm not talking about the red lights and the cold plunges. And sure, like it has its place, but I'm simply talking about getting enough sleep and prioritizing your sleep schedule, getting to bed and turning off, the computer and the phone and the lights and the television at a reasonable hour so that you can wind down, so that you can get and stay asleep, so you can get enough sleep so that you can wake up, you can manage your stress levels, you can have better blood sugar and insulin management when you're getting enough sleep, right? Which is ultimately driving your metabolism more than you can possibly realize, far above and beyond what you're consuming and what you're expending through exercise. Because we know unequivocally that poor sleep spikes your cravings, it contributes to low willpower and discipline, and it's going to absolutely tank your hormones, your testosterone, your estrogen, your progesterone. For guys, this is huge. And so when you get these 3 things right, when you're eating real food, when you're moving your body intentionally daily, when you're truly committed to getting enough sleep, and actually, in some particular cases, this actually might mean training less. As an example, I was forced to take probably about 5 weeks off. You guys possibly heard one of my recent episodes on how I had 3 bulging discs in my low back and was basically horizontal for over a week. But listen, I took about 5 weeks off from the gym, and I swear my body composition has improved. And now, I obviously, I do think maybe I lost a tiny bit of lean muscle tissue, but also my appetite went down. I ate very well while I was down for the count, and I feel better. I have more energy now that I'm back in the gym. My training's going great. Like I said, I'm a bit leaner than I was. And so I think we need the opportunity to give ourselves some extended breaks too, and stop just go, go, go all of the time. So like I said, when you get all these 3 things right, you're, eating real food, moving your body intentionally daily, recovering deeply, then your metabolism is going to work for you instead of against you. So to wrap things up here, the next time that you think, I just need to work out more, what I want you to do is I want you to remember that your body doesn't burn fat because you sweat harder or burn more calories or do barf inducing boot camp workouts, right? Or red line your cardio in, Orange Theory or whatever it is. Your body burns fat when your environment and your behaviors are aligned with your biology. And I'm going to say that again. Your body burns fat when your environment and your behaviors are aligned with your biology. Your exercise is for health, it's for strength, it's for longevity, it's for cognitive function. Your nutrition is for fat loss. So if you've been spinning your wheels in the gym and you're wondering why the scale isn't moving, I promise it's not your effort, it's likely your strategy. And so if you guys want to know and you want some support on how to understand this process a little more in depth for you so that you can start working with your metabolism and not against it, then make sure to follow me at Body Systems Coaching on Instagram. Or if you want a complimentary nutrition strategy call with me and you want to talk through where you are now, where you want to go, what's getting in the way, so that we can identify those roadblocks and help create a path to help you bridge that gap, then just click a link on the nutrition strategy call below in the show notes. Because the truth is, once you understand how your body's actually working, you're never going to have to diet or overtrain again. I got you guys. I hope this has been helpful for you. If it has, do me a favor, share this with someone whom you think could benefit. And hey, leave a positive rating and review in iTunes for me. That would be super helpful. Appreciate ya, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.